All right, guys, welcome back to the King's Table podcast. I am your host, Ashish Nathu. I'm excited to be back. We unfortunately skipped a week, but we are back together again. The band is back together again. I am joined with my good friends, Mike Ayala, the Sage, tapping in from Austin with Aaron and Amuchastegui. You guys are both in the same office, split by a wall. We also have Aaron Amuchastegui, the trend spotter himself, and of course, Matty Aitchison, the hero of hospitality, looking like a stud, as always. Welcome back to the show, everybody. So we have a lot of different topics today. We're going to do something a little different. We've all agreed, and as we're learning and as we're building better chemistry and trying to bring more value to you, we want to bring more topics and really spiff through them quickly and try to cover more topics and get our opinions about what's going on in the world. There's so many fun things going on, and we want to be able to talk about more than 2 or 3 topics a show. So we're going to get a little bit of a different cadence from us. And if you like that or you don't like that, please give us some feedback. But we just have so much to talk about, and we're always pinging each other throughout the week about all the things we want to discuss. I wanted to share before we get into some topics really quick, guys. Like I'm on a couple-day fast, so if I pass out in the middle of the episode, then maybe somebody can cover for me.
Are you angry yet?
But I wanted.
Are you getting grumpy yet?
I was grumpy yesterday. You know, I'm not grumpy when I get to see you, but be careful. If you talk too much about debt, I may get there. You know what I'm saying? So one of the things I want.
This is the whitest I've ever seen your eyes.
Is it? It's all that meat detox, Mikey. I'm detoxing from all the meat. So one of the things I was talking about, I have this nutritionist that is helping me kind of dial in my health this year, and I'm a completely vegetarian. Some of you guys know that, and they basically said to me that I have to like significantly increase my protein intake, like let's say 4 to 5 times what I'm consuming right now. And I'm a complete vegetarian, so I don't eat fish, I don't eat eggs, and many Indians do. Many Indians are vegetarian, and we can get into why that is later. But so I'm like challenging him to keep a pure vegetarian diet and try to increase the amount of protein to like, let's say 100 to 120 grams of protein. They're asking me to do 180 grams of protein a day, which I don't even know if that's possible or healthy for me, but let's just say it's over 100. I'm probably consuming 20, 25. And the fun thing about Indians is that our diet is actually pretty Ayurvedic. It's balanced in a lot of ways, but it's very heavy in carb, very heavy in like rice and breads and vegetables, but very light in protein. And so I'm committing myself to figure out with this nutritionist like a completely natural vegetarian way for Indians to consume a high amount of protein that's sustainable. So that's what I wanted to start with.
Can you do
today.
Supplements?
Fun.
Like, are you okay with like pea protein powder and stuff like that? Or are you trying to do it all with normal food?
Protein powders are totally fine and normal. Yeah, we have a morning protein shake, and there's like 30, 40 grams of protein in there. And then you add another like scoop full of yogurt or something like that to add another 10 or 15 grams, right? So you got to learn how to stack, and I'm learning.
Do Indians eat tofu?
Yeah, Indians eat tofu too. But what's fun about tofu and soy is that men shouldn't consume too much tofu and soy, more than probably twice a week, because it like I don't want to act or behave like a doctor, but I think there's something about estrogen and your imbalance of testosterone. So you can get some protein from tofu, but you don't want to be consuming a high amount of tofu every single day, as a guy at least.
Don't become a soy boy on us, all right? You're talking to a steak eater. I think I eat bacon 4 to 5 days a week. I think I eat steak at least once a day. Like, and man, I'm just a fucking machine over here when I'm counting.
You're so many chickpeas and spinach to hit that. But I was vegan for a year, and when I did it, I really dialed in to hit really high protein numbers, and it can be done. But man, it won't be on accident.
Be done. You've got to get super focused.
Why are you doing a fast? Tell the world.
Well, I just want to like get prepared. I want to like clean out my gut. I'm on a 3-day water fast. You can have like electrolytes and some like light, even bone broth. Like he's like, okay, let's have some bone broth. Well, I can't have bone broth. So I'm now making my own like vegetable broth. I don't want the shit from the store that has all the sodium and stuff. So I made my own vegetable broth. And so I'm just kind of cleaning out my gut and starting from scratch and then building up from there and learning how to count macros and really knowing what my body is doing well and what it doesn't do well with. It's super easy to eat crap. It's really easy to just eat carbs or bread because it's just there. So I'm going to change that.
When we were in Cabo and we're eating the pudi bread or the naan bread from the what are those things called?
Yes. Yeah.
So
pudis, yeah.
So good. Pudis. Yeah. So good.
I mean, the problem is it's yummy. It's creamy. It's fatty. It's carby. It's delicious, but it's not good for you. It's not going to help me get a six pack. Okay. So
the only thing I was going to add to that, sorry, before you jump on, I wish I had there was a video of an Indian, kind of guru, very wise sage guy, but he was a health nutritionist guy. And one of the things that he talked about, because I just did a 4-day water fast myself, and usually I'll do a 24-hour fast at least once a month. But he talked a lot about, and I'd really love for someone with a true nutritionist and scientific background to kind of be able to break down or validate or debunk some of the things that I've heard more and more people talk about. But he was like, I do at a minimum a 7-day, or I think his was a 12-day fast once a year. He does a 4-day fast once a quarter, and he does a 24-hour fast once a month. And he said, and he threw out some statistics around, what that does for you and how it reduces certain diseases and heart and health risks and all kinds of stuff. I didn't go down the rabbit hole in terms of validating it too much, but it's just something that I've subscribed to, at least on the 24-hour fast, and then trying to work in some more of those. I feel honestly phenomenal afterwards.
Yeah, it is really a great way to reset. There is a lot of science about fasting. We've talked about, I think, on this podcast about their spiritual benefits. All major scriptures have been talking about fasting for thousands of years. It is a very big thing in our culture too. Let's just go around. I'd love to, before we get into subtopics, I am committed to having a six-pack in 2024. I'm literally not walking into the next year without a six-pack.
A six-pack of what?
Do you guys have a six-pack of beer, Mikey? What are your health goals for 2024, Mike?
So I'm drinking zero alcohol in 2024. That's
oh shit.
Yeah, that's my big one. And until so it's interesting because my daughter turns 21 in December, and so we're softly toying with the idea of a pass day. But yeah, so no alcohol. The other thing that's big on my list is reducing my adipose tissue, which, not to go down a rabbit hole there, but you know, like you were talking about Indians, Ashish, and the interesting thing in America, you've got all these guys with big bellies, and some of them even have six packs. But they're, when you see a guy that has like a six pack, but his belly's like big, one of the most unhealthy things is the adipose tissue. And so I've been doing DEXA scans to really see the adipose tissue, and I have high adipose tissue, which is the fat that surrounds your organs, and it's the most unhealthy fat that exists. And it's actually really
fatty
unhealthy.
Liver. The same thing. Fatty
liver is like an indicator of it. But the adipose tissue is the amount of fat, and I have like 3 pounds of adipose tissue fat, which doesn't sound like a lot. But my number, which this isn't going to mean anything to anybody, but my number is 89.96, and I'm in the mid range of, unhealthy, but healthy is like 52 or lower. So I'm probably like halfway through the mid range of area of concern. So I really want to focus on the adipose tissue, which, like Ash, what you're talking about, I mean, fasting, diet, less alcohol, all of those things are going to equate.
All those things.
Yep.
Maddie?
Mine are simple. I think sometimes we get, wrapped up in always trying to add something new and layered in. Mine is just default consistency to a daily sweat, like sweating through my shirt every single day. I track all my stats on my Whoop, so I'm always accountable in the groups that I'm in. I always like to work in one new fitness challenge a year, so I think I'm going to do I was going to do the 29029. And somebody in my accountability group was like, dude, you're going to go and hike up a mountain however many times they tell you to hike up that mountain. Like, how fucking boring. Why not go and do something even more epic? So I'm maybe thinking of retooling that a little bit. I've got my sauna, my red light, my cold plunge, my man cave all set up. So really it's just about getting reps, and I'm going for fastballs down the plate. I'm not trying to hit anything too crazy this year, except just keeping my consistency.
You already got your 6-pack. Mooch, what's on your list?
Maddie's plan reminds me of our chat last time, our 365 medium. We had a few people on YouTube say they're going to order the 365 medium shirt. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to one of those last ones. And then when Ashish started with the fast, any listeners out there thinking about it, if you've started your year and you're struggling to do your fitness thing, there is nothing that jumps you off more than a 5-day fast. Yeah. Now I'll say Ashish is cheating by taking any sort of broth. You're supposed to go, if you do water only, just 5 days, no coffee, no food, no carbs, no nothing, life-changing stuff. Last year when I did it, I went from like 17% body fat to 13 within 5 days. Within another month and a half, I was down to 9.5%. And there's nothing that'll jolt you more. So just Google the benefits. On day 4 and day 5, you start killing cancer and generating stem cells, and that's why we're all big fans of it. So, but there's going to be other websites that'll tell you guys more about that. I don't know what I'm going to do this year. Every year I do something, like the 29029 or an Ironman or, a big hike, something like that. I'll have to come up. I'll probably sign up for an Ironman because I think that's a good, keystone goal. It makes me be super healthy for at least 3 months. I also sweat, every day. Kind of the quick little cheat routine, get on the bike, jump in the sauna, jump in the cryo later in the afternoon. Keeps me nice and maintained. My 6-pack isn't as good as Maddie's, but I'm catching up. So I'm coming for you.
Catching up too, Maddie.
On one of the deals. What I like about what Maddie said is he's like, why would you do something boring like a 29029? Yeah, just go fucking climb Everest, bro. Just do it. Just do the whole. Don't do the fake Everest. Just do the real Everest.
I'm communicating with Basecamp right now, so we'll see.
Yeah, dude, I'm kind of interested in that. I remember thinking, as you're setting goals, then we can jump right on. I remember thinking, why would anyone ever climb Everest or climb K2? And I remember meeting Carl Drew at a Front Row Dads event. You guys probably know him. And he talked about climbing K2, and it's 1 out of 12 people that summit die on the way down. And I was thinking, why would someone ever do that? And then I watched the Everest movie, and I'm like, why would someone ever do that? And then near the end, I'm like, maybe I need to climb Everest. So people are crazy on that. But maybe we work our way into those. But hope everyone's starting the year off awesome. And if you're struggling catching that health thing, try a fast. After you make that sacrifice, it's way easier to keep going.
Well, let's start with some politics and economics. Then we have lots of we have housing today. We have Tiger Woods on the schedule. We have the Fed. We have affordable housing. So debt, lots of fun topics today. Let's just kind of whip through a bunch. Firstly, our boy Wonder lost on Monday on the 15th. Donald Trump took Iowa in a landslide. I'd love to get your guys' opinions about this, but it was really clear. Vivek got, I think, less than 10% of the vote, maybe 8% of the caucus votes. Within 12 hours, shut the campaign down and endorsed Donald Trump and showed up on stage with him. It was all over Twitter. I just want to say I was a little sad. I'm going to be honest. I feel like he was an underrated candidate. I feel like he outworked everybody. Part of me feels like he was just showing people, he was almost on a job audition of how hard he can work and how savvy he can be, and then see where he gets picked up. Maybe that's why he pivoted so quickly on a Donald Trump wagon, so fast. I don't know if that's telling to you guys or not, but I just think it's fascinating. I mean, there's a probability he becomes VP, which I think would not be a bad thing for him, coming out of nowhere in a year, being the vice president of the United States. Suck it up. I know, Mike, we talked about that before. But I feel like I was just sad. I was sad that we didn't know how good this person or this candidate could have been. I wish maybe he was too ahead of his time and he had some radical thoughts, but I mean, we spent some quality time with him here. I've seen so many of his podcasts where he really slows down. He's not so eccentric, but yeah, I got to be honest, I was a little sad. So we're now in Trump era. We're in Trump season. Looks like that's moving forward. That freight train is moving forward, and I don't know. We're looking like Trump's going to be the runaway here. So
I thought he bailed out a little bit too early, because there's been times when people lose the Iowa caucus and still become the rep. Now he did get beat by a lot. I think that was probably a sense of how much money he had been spending, and maybe he's just out of money. Like when he came and talked to us, he was like pretty like real at going like, I need to raise some money now. I've put in my own. And so maybe it's one of those things where it's like he should have given it a longer fight, but he was like, is it worth another $500,000 or whatever after he's put out so much? I thought the last week was a little bit weird. He did a post about Trump that said, vote for me to help save Trump, because if you vote for Carrie Lake instead, they're going to try to make it between Trump and Carrie Lake, and then they're going to oust him, and then Carrie Lake's going to have to be our nominee. Am I getting the names right? Who was second? Was she second?
Nikki Haley.
Sorry, totally wrong. Nikki Haley. So everything I said, he talks about Nikki Haley on that instead. So that was a little bit weird, and it was saddening that after that Trump like bashed him, and then right afterward he talks Trump up, because he's been kind of pitching Trump the whole time. I agree with Ash that maybe he was never trying to win, and trying to get in there by the way some of the stuff played out. But it was just it was a disappointing week. Definitely a bummer.
Yeah, I didn't know that Carrie Lake was running out of Arizona. That would have been fun.
I was like, damn.
That would have been even
Sorry.
more
They should get on the ballot.
Yeah, I mixed it up.
I think that he ran a beautiful campaign. I think he ran the campaign that Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis and everybody else should have ran. And I think he truly set himself up for a very bright future in politics. I mean, I think he said, while he rubbed some people the wrong way and maybe, like you said, went a little hard, a little brash on some topics that maybe people weren't ready to hear as straightforward as he put it, I think overall he did a phenomenal job for somebody that was not on anyone's radar, to now the fact that we're sitting here talking about him potentially having a seat as the vice president, or an opportunity, or at least, as Trump said, right, he's going to be working with us. And so I think
in some role, yeah,
I think he's got a bright future in politics. I like him. I like his youth. There's still some things about him that I don't fully trust with his background. And I've seen a couple, people kind of go dig in on his past a little bit. And there's a video, and there's proof on stuff that he put his mom on the board of a certain organization that was really, he kind of pump and dump the stock a little bit, that he made
he's Indian. Of course he's putting his mom on the board, Maddie.
But that's fine. I'm cool with that. But when you try and bury and hide your history with that particular company and drug, and that's where you made the majority of your money, and where most people that were in that lost all of their money, those are things that are a little bit questionable to me, especially when we're playing in the big pharma space. So I'm never one to knock somebody on their hustle and making money and doing that kind of stuff. But there's a couple things in his past and his history that I'm not fully aligned with. So and maybe that's another topic of discussion at a later point in time.
For another day. Yeah.
That being said, I think he did a great job. I think he did what most Americans are feeling, which is America first discussions and policy. And I just want to pull this up really fast and show you guys something that I think JPMorgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, super smart guy. And he's always pretty good at kind of cutting through a lot of the BS and the narratives, and, kind of playing both sides relatively well. And I think this clip is a reflection of why so many people are behind Trump, because he feels like the most probable outcome for getting America first and back on track. And so I'm just going to pull this up really fast to play this for you guys, because I think this kind of represents what a lot of Americans who maybe don't align with Donald Trump's values, but they align with his policy and the actions he took, and how the actions actually played out for all Americans. So whether you like him, of what he says on a hot mic, or how he delivers a comment, what he said he was going to do and the policies that he enacted, how they impacted America and Americans, I think is what people are getting behind now because they feel the alternative isn't reflecting that. So
when they talk about MAGA, when people say MAGA, they're actually looking at people voting for Trump and they think they're voting, and they're basically scapegoating them that you are like him. But I don't think they're voting for Trump because of his family values. If you look, just take a step back, be honest. He's kind of right about NATO, kind of right about immigration. He grew the economy quite well. Tax reform worked. He was right about some of China. I don't like what he did.
I said China virus.
Yeah, I understand. He made right. And I don't like how he said things in Mexico. I don't like, but he wasn't wrong about some of these critical issues, and that's why they're voting for him. And I think people should be a little more respectful of our fellow citizens. And when you guys have people up here, you should always ask the why. Not like it's a binary thing. You're supporting Trump, you're not supporting Trump. Why are you supporting?
It's hard to hate 75 million of your fellow Americans.
I agree. And the Democrats have done a pretty good job with the deplorables, hugging out their Bibles and their beer and their guns. I mean, really, could we just stop that stuff and actually grow up and treat other people with respect and listen to them a little bit? And I do think the economy will affect. I think this negative talk about MAGA is going to hurt Biden's election campaign. I wish.
So I think that is a great example of where a lot of Americans are at, in the sense of, and I think the caucus and the runaway in Iowa was a reflection of, let's put all of our energy and effort behind the person we believe has the best chance to get America back on track. Because I think the polls and majority of Americans are going, I care about America first. Let's start leaving all this extreme right and extreme left discussions out of it, and let's go for the person and the policy that we think is going to put America back on track.
Mikey, what do you think about that clip about Vivek?
I will make this quick. So for the first time in the history of the world, I may have been wrong. He may be vice president. I'm just saying. There wasn't. A lot can happen in 10 months, but when we were talking about Vivek on the after fact, like, I just could not see a day where he would hitch his wagon to Trump, and I said that. But watching everything play out, I mean, even everything that you guys are saying, which I agree with. One of the things that he has, I guess, a strike against him, which could be a good or a bad, but people just don't really know. They don't really know who Vivek is, and even the things that Maddie was saying. And who knows? I mean, 4 years as a vice president could show the world who he is, and we'll just have to wait and see. But it could play out very interesting. Yeah. Well, and the last thing, I'm still not convinced that this might be the biggest showing for an independent candidate ever with Mr. Kennedy. So it's going to just be interesting to see what plays out in the next 10 months. And
there's a lot that has to happen in the next month or two, right? I mean, the Supreme Court is voting on what's going on in Colorado and is in Maine in February. So there's a lot of hurdles to cross. So we'll keep all the listeners informed about our valuable opinions about everything politics. I wanted to talk about some business and sports really quick. I don't know if you guys saw this article about Elon Musk. Actually just came out today, and I would love your thoughts on this. Elon Musk is actually sent a tweet, didn't even send a note to the board of directors, sent a tweet out that said that if I don't get 25% voting rights, that I'm not going to move forward on AI. And if I don't get what I want, I basically may have to take AI into a completely separate company in Tesla. And everybody knows that Tesla really is leading the charge in AI. They have some of the best data set in AI. It's a huge component of why I bought the car, because it's the only car that's really as close to full self-driving than any other car. And they're talking about selling that software, selling that IP to other companies as well, other car companies. And just, he's so at the forefront of AI and was a founder of OpenAI. So just thought I'd see what you guys have thought about that, because I think it's just fascinating that, I mean, Elon is Elon in the way he maneuvers things, but there's two things that are going on. I mean, he's leveraging for more voting rights, but he's also signaling that if I don't have voting rights, then I feel like maybe AI is too dangerous in the hands of somebody else. So I'd love you guys' thoughts about that, if you see there's something else going on there. But I think that's telling that somebody like him yes, he's the richest man on the planet and all of his value is tied up in Tesla. So he wouldn't, the stock's down 3% today. It's down like 20% in 30 days. So his daily movement of wealth is in the billions, but he really does care about, humanity and what we do with AI and multiplanetary species. I just love your thoughts on what he's doing and why he's doing it. Maddie, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short. I think there's a reason he is so successful, so smart, why world governments are consistently, consulting with him. He's just beyond his years and most people when it comes to the most complicated topics on planet Earth that we're dealing with currently and that he can have foresight to see in the future. And AI is one. I think I listened to and watched a podcast maybe 4 or 5 years ago with him talking about AI and how it is the biggest threat and opportunity to humanity, and how critical it is for governments to get the right voices and people on these committees, having the right discussions, formulating policies around it. Because when you think about, and this is what he said, when you think about some of the politicians, let's just go into our Senate and look at how many 80-plus-year-olds are and are making policy around things like this. And they just have no clue about technology at a high level, let alone artificial intelligence, which is exponentially different and more complicated. I don't think he's wrong for saying what he's saying. I think it is something that he feels very convicted about. And he's saying, if you want me to play in this space, here are my terms and my rules if we're going to do this. If not, I don't feel like it's safe. And therefore, I would pursue this path as a result. Which one do you guys want to do? And I think if anybody is smart and is betting on Elon Musk and his track record, they would be wise to be open to that discussion. I think there's covenants and things that you can work in there to protect everyone's interest. But I thought it was an interesting take, and at the same time, I don't think he's wrong, and I'm not mad at it.
Yeah. Mooch, Mike, any thoughts?
He's brilliant, man. The fact that he could see a moment and realize, I think he must see how much he's at the tipping point of robots and some of the other stuff. And that was because so much early Tesla valuation was what they were going to be doing later. And he was realizing that he's in a unique position to be able to do it. And he started branching off all these the fact that he's like building robots through Tesla and he was still going to keep it inside Tesla when it was his brainchild. Like it actually makes more sense for robots to not be part of Tesla, right? For them to be their own, like Tesla should be cars, so I think it makes a lot of sense. So it's unfair in the sense if he used Tesla resources to build it up to a certain point, and then he's like, hey, I'm going to take what I know and leave legally. There might be a struggle there, but I think it must be at a tipping point where he knows he's the guy. I was at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas last week. There's some crazy, incredible stuff going on. China has a robot like the Tesla robot now. There's lots of like AI technology. Like we're living in just a fascinating, really, really cool time that we're going to see breakthroughs on all sorts of AI and robots and things like that. So I think he's smart for asking for more power at the time. He's such a badass where he can start with such a small stake of a company and be willing to grow it because he's grown it over time, right? And to go like, no, I'm so good, I'm going to bet on myself and get more over time. Long story short is I don't think robots should be a part of the Tesla plan. I think they should be a part of a different company anyway. And so selling the self-driving technology, that should be owned by Tesla because they use Tesla to develop it. So I think he would struggle to pull that out and build up to a new one or sell it off or have Tesla be an owner or something. So I think it's pretty cool news.
Yeah, I think it's fun because they position it as if he's doing a power grab. But if you read the tea leaves, maybe he is seeing something that no one else sees and says, hey, if I don't have voting rights, this can go south really bad in the wrong hands, right?
100%.
If he knows what the technology can really do, which no one else really does, he has sight of it. It may not be a power grab. It may be hey, I don't trust anyone else with this information besides myself.
Yeah, it's like developing a nuke. You don't trust the...
Yeah, I was going to say, if you think about it, like, how many people on planet Earth, I'm guessing we can count them on these two hands, know more than AI than he does.
Yeah. Maybe one hand, bro.
And most of them probably work for him or he's in business with them.
Tiger Woods leaving Nike. They are splitting up after a 27-year collaboration as the world's largest sportswear company. This golf legend has worked with Nike. I think everybody has watched this story for over 27 years. Mooch, why is this important? What's going on here?
There's a couple articles on it too that said just really how much he made. He either made 500 million over the past 27 years or 660 million over the past 27 years with this partnership. You know, I just remember in the Woods documentary, early on, the partnership that they had was pretty special. And, you know, Nike, I remember a time too when they said they were going to get really intense with him. And meaning they said, how big do we want to make Tiger? How bold are we going to get? I remember an ad when they were talking about essentially one of the golf courses that like black people couldn't play at. Right. And it was like Tiger's done this. He's broken this record. And he still can't play at X. And it showed one of the all white golf clubs in the US. And that was really bold of both Tiger and Nike to get on the same team with that and say, yeah, let's like ruffle some feathers and let's push some things. I think overall at the end of it, what it really looks like is it's a business decision and maybe just a good reminder that sometimes you can have a perfect partnership that makes lots of money, that both parties work together on it. Because at first they were like, has Woods' value declined? No, even though he's not the player that he used to be, he is still the only person that people want to go see at the PGA events. It doesn't matter that he had the affairs, the car wrecks, that he can't play anymore. There's more clips of him and his son playing in like the father-son amateurs than anyone else out there by like 100-fold. And I'm obsessed and I'm watching him like crazy, and I can't wait to see his son become the young cocky golfer that he's going to be. So the moral of the story is you can have amazing businesses, amazing partnerships, make each other plenty of money, and then go, okay, it's time to celebrate what we did and move on. It doesn't seem like either of them have resentments. I think the plans were just changing. I read part of it too, is how much Nike, Nike's golf, their share of golf apparel has just gone down significantly. So I don't think they're going to try to replace that. I think they're going to try to maybe go back into basketball and some other things. But you can be good partners and still break up at the end of the day.
Yeah, I was at a seminar yesterday. I'd love to break this topic with you guys because you just hit on a really good topic that is transferable to all of us as business owners. How many people actually have a capital strategy for their business? This was the topic of conversation at this seminar meeting I had yesterday. And as privately held companies, and I'd love to ask you guys this question. I'm going off topic here, but what is the rate of return? You're privately held, whatever size of businesses we are. What do you think a fair and reasonable rate of return on your capital investment should be?
And is that on an annual basis? Is that an accumulative?
Yeah, let's
investment?
keep it annual for now.
I mean, I think it really depends on the business model. That's a pretty loaded question. I'm trying to work through that in my head as I'm talking about it out loud. But if you're investing a certain amount of money back into the company every year, right? I mean, I would think you want to hit certain return thresholds on that investment, but at the same time, it's not necessary. It depends, right? Are you playing for top line growth and you're getting more value on revenue growth, or are you playing EBITDA growth, right? Like it's a different. Yeah, it depends on the model.
This could be a wormhole topic, but let me just say really quick, the way that this was framed to me, and it's kind of ties into what was going on with Tiger, is there is a certain point where we just end up owning a job and not an investment in a business. So you look at our business. If our goal is to invest capital and grow it, we can invest in the S&P 500, right? And we should expect a 10% return. If we're investing in Tesla or Apple, you would expect a higher return than 10%. If you're investing, and that's a $100 billion company. If you invest in $1 billion company, you would expect a higher return. If you invest in a $100 million publicly traded company, you would expect a higher return. If you invest in $100 million privately held company, you expect a higher return. And then ultimately, if you're a $20, $30 million privately held, one sole proprietor owner company, you would expect a higher return than that. So on average, they said about 30 to 40% return on your capital every single year. Now, that is not on your original investment. That is on the investment value as it grows. So today your company's worth $1 million. You need to grow by 30%. Next year, you need to grow that 1.3 to another 30%. At some point, if you're starting to have diminishing returns, there is a point where you may need to re-strategize the growth of the business to increase that investment return, or you need to exit, right? And so you look at Nike and you look at these long-term relationships. I think it's really smart for both of them to realize that it may be an end of an era, and we've no longer getting the return on our investment, and we need to part ways. That's what
the ROI went down. That makes sense.
Yeah, the ROI doesn't make sense anymore, right?
An early consultant that I worked with made this comment, and he said, if your business isn't helping you achieve your personal goals, you just own a job. And that's kind of always stuck with me. But the fallacy that I think is wrong for most people about that question is that, there's professional investors that invest in business for an ROI on capital. And I'm guessing that whatever room you were sitting in was a room full of, professional investors of some sort. The majority of our audience and the majority of business owners that you talk to on a daily basis, and I'm not saying it's a bad question. It's actually a good question, and we need to think more about that as business owners. But also, there's so many reasons why people get into business and what they want out of that business. And I think it's one component, a very important component, obviously. And I loved Maddie's reframing question at the beginning. Are we talking annualized? Are we talking about what season? But I'm not in any way saying that I don't think we should have benchmarks on ROI from our capital invested. But when I got into business, there was one reason and one reason alone. I was working out of town 100 plus hours a week. I was missing my wife's third pregnancy. There's all these reasons why people get into business. And I would argue, Aaron and I are sitting at Aaron's office, and GoBundance is out there having a meeting, which we're going to jump into when we're done. But there's different levels of conversation. And I love the question because it forces people to think about the ROI on their business. But the ROI is one component of why many people run their business: lifestyle, freedom, challenge, passion. I don't agree with this, but you hear so many people, if you love the business that you're in, you won't work a day of your life. It's a great question because at the end of the day, those businesses should produce a return for us, and we should be thinking about it. But also, there's so many entrepreneurs, probably many in our audience, that are, yes, it should produce an ROI, but there's a lot of other areas of ROI too. I just wanted to interject that because the day that I have a certain business that I'm just purely thinking about it from a financial return on investment is the day that I should probably replace myself in that business and move more toward, a board of directors in that business, and then treat it purely as a financial return metric. So,
you're spot on, right? I think I'm not advocating that that's the only question and why the business should exist or what we should be driving. I just thought we were all entrepreneurs and owning business owners. We were not capital investors, which was why this question was fun, is because it got us out of the seat of just a sole proprietor running a business and thinking about your business as if you were a capital investor. And so what does that mean if you're out of that seat and not so emotionally attached? So it's a thought experiment. Maddie, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it depends. This question would mean something different to you if you were asked this question 8 years ago, let alone now.
Yeah,
totally
right, brother. Totally right.
If you're a true
totally
small business, a true entrepreneur that, is just looking at business as a lifestyle play, that's one thing. But if you're a VC, right, if you're a private equity firm that's looking at a business from a pure number standpoint, a pure investment standpoint, and you're looking at it through that lens, that's going to be different. And I'm guessing the room you were in, right, was all mid to enterprise level businesses, not the mom and pop business that's making $500K gross and they're walking away with 125 at the end of the year. So I think it's all contextual. But what Mike brought up is a really great point, right? Because just like wealth means different things to different people, I think when you're thinking about this question, the answers and why people are in business and what ROI means to them could mean something totally different outside of just your P&L and balance sheet and what return that shows.
So a different way that I've recently started to look at stuff too, where it like throws all the other stuff out the window. I'm sharing with you guys right now the Stripe, the access to see some of the background of one of my software companies. But we have this factor that says where did it go? Subscriber lifetime value here, right? So it's my recurring revenue software company. That right side says every subscriber is worth $765 over the life of them. And what that really means is the average person that signs up ends up staying a member for, let's say, like 28 months. So in theory, if every one of my customers is worth $765, I can spend $760 to acquire them, and it's worth it. Now, if I spent that much, I would actually show losses over the next several months to get it, but long-term value goes up because it's not just an annual ROI, it's a lifetime value. So some of the things that maybe Nike thinks about, and any big advertising in business, I think some of the times you're looking for short ROI, and small businesses are looking for short ROI because you might not be around in a year or 2 years to keep servicing those customers. But it's really hard to value what's the lifetime value of something like that. Like how long will someone actually be a Nike fan because of that, or with anything else? So lifetime value, totally different way to look at, at market sales and marketing and what your ROI is. Takes a lot longer to get it, but no matter what you invest in sales and marketing wise, you will get a payback forever as long as you stay in business.
Yes. And speaking of businesses, we're going to pivot a little bit to a subject matter that Mikey knows a lot about. Affordable housing. Looks like the Biden administration passed a housing plan. They're really double downing on affordable housing throughout the United States. They're trying to get the mobile home manufacturing facilities back to work, really increasing the affordable housing and manufactured housing as a larger component in new housing in the United States. There's a concept called WIMBY. Mikey, I don't know if you want to add to that too. Is a yes in my backyard. The ADU market is growing as well. California has been super aggressive with that. We know that being here in Maddie, there's so much legislation that has passed in the last couple of years to promote ADU construction. That's an additional dwelling unit where you can put an additional living unit on top of your property without too much headache. And so we're definitely seeing this trend. You're seeing in housing prices across America that housing is just the biggest limitation we have. So Mikey, what are you seeing? What is going on in this program here, and what should we be paying attention to?
Well, I think you covered it all. No, I'm
Thanks,
kidding. Yeah, you nailed it. The thing that I really wanted to point out without going down a deep rabbit hole is just the YIMBY concept. Yes, in my backyard. I mean, we've talked about this so many times as real estate investors. The opposite of that is NIMBY, not in my backyard. I've been in the manufactured housing space since 2007, and that's one of the things that so many planning commissions and zoning authorities and communities. I sat on the planning commission for probably 7 years, and every time somebody would come, want to build an apartment complex or whatever it was, anytime somebody needed a variance that wasn't within zoning, there was always the people that came out, the neighbors, they have to be notified. And the NIMBY conversation was always not in my backyard. And the fact that you're hearing so much about this from a YIMBY perspective, yes, in my backyard, for the real estate investors that are listening to this, I think we really got to keep kind of our eyes open to what's changing. And it's interesting because it's the communities, states like California, and I mean, it's happening in Austin, Texas, where the ADU thing, and again, I don't want to go down a deep rabbit hole on this, but I think it's just something that we need to keep on the front of our radar because there's so much investment opportunity for young, newer investors to get in on some of this, where you could go in a municipality, if you're paying attention to it, go sit in a planning commission meeting, go sit in a city council meeting for, once a month and just hear what's going on there. But there's an opportunity in these cities that are allowing this stuff to happen where you could go buy a single family property, that seems really expensive. Maybe it's $800,000 and it's out of reach or unaffordable. And just because of zoning changes, you could add 1 or 2 or 3 more dwelling places to that and really 3x, 4x your investment just because of what's changing in the municipalities. And so, I'm in the mobile home manufactured housing space. And one of the big things that we're seeing right now, by the way, this goes back to Ben Carson. I watched this under the Trump administration. If you go to the Manufactured Housing Association events, Ben Carson is a huge advocate for affordable housing. So this has been going on under multiple administrations. But one of the big things that's happening right now, Freddie Mac is actually talking about, with support from the White House, they're talking about financing chattel. And what that means for the listeners, one of the biggest challenges that we have in manufactured housing is that it's not financeable because it's not permanentized. They don't own the land underneath of it. And Freddie Mac is working with the White House to literally roll out a financing plan where they will finance residents on manufactured housing. This is like unheard of in the past. And when that type of stuff starts happening, it creates so much investment opportunity for young investors, old investors, seasoned investors, new investors. We just have to be paying attention to how fast things are changing. And so many times people look at this from a negative perspective, whether it's mobile home parks, whether it's, apartments being built, whether it's ADUs, because again, a lot of residents don't want, a new house being built in their backyard or their neighbor's backyard for, reasons that seem apparent. But when there starts to be a consensus and people start to understand, we were talking a few episodes back about, how do you change things going forward in America for the family and affordability and all of these things? Well, we have to start thinking through a new lens. We have to start feeling, I guess some empathy for our fellow Americans. And I'm just saying to investors, like, pay attention to this stuff, because if you see where the puck is going, as Maddie always talks about with the Wayne Gretzky quote, if you can see where things are going, there's investment opportunities that maybe aren't. I mean, in GoBundance, we know a lot of guys that are doing ADU investments in California and all of that, but this is going to spread like wildfire across America in the urban centers, which again is where people want to be. 10 years ago, we started investing in tertiary markets, Midwest. Why? Because there was a lot of manufactured housing there and we didn't have to worry about municipalities. But there's a day coming where even in larger municipalities like Austin, like Phoenix, like California, where maybe mobile home park investing isn't something that you have to do in the Midwest, you can do it in some of these markets. The ADU investing. If you would have said 10 years ago, ADU investing is going to be like, the future, very, very few people would have been on that trend. And so I guess if I just had to narrow this down, just pay attention to what the government is doing, pay attention to what they're incentivizing. I look at the White House releases on ADUs, manufactured housing, all of that regularly, because when the White House is saying that they're going to fund manufactured housing, when the White House is saying that they're going to push ADU investments, we should be listening and paying attention to that.
Spot on. Why do you think, Mikey, I do have a question. Why do you think that modular construction, which is different than mobile home parks, why hasn't that taken off, or is it taking off?
It
do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, it is taken off. I've actually got a friend that's an apartment builder, developer, and he literally just put a post up yesterday of these huge pallets showing up at an apartment complex that he's building.
Yep.
And it literally looked like a crate. There was like hundreds of these crates. And what they are is like pre-manufactured apartment buildings. And I remember a day, I don't know, this was probably 12 years ago, I was working on a project in the gold mining industry, which was, they were 16 plexes. And they were literally manufactured homes that were just being stacked. So this has been around for a while. But I think with anything new, adoption takes some time. They have to work out the kinks. People have to, the financing of it is a huge part of it, because actually what you said about manufactured housing is an interesting, I'll just share a couple points on that. So there's not a lot of difference between what was traditionally known as mobile homes and what is now known as manufactured homes and modular homes. They're pretty much the same. The big difference at the end of the day is the financing and how you fund it and everything else, because if you take a modular home and you put it on a foundation that's on its own piece of land, a bank will finance that in a heartbeat. What they won't finance is a manufactured home that's set up on a piece of property that doesn't have a foundation under it, or is set up in a mobile home park community, manufactured home community that doesn't have a foundation under it. And the reason why is because it's not permanentized. So a bank doesn't want, there's a lot of fear around this because banks still think that if it's a mobile home, that it's easily movable. And that's just not the case. Even if it isn't on a foundation, they're on a poured concrete pad with piers. They're strapped down. It's not easily movable. And unless you're in the manufactured housing industry, owning mobile home parks, et cetera, people still think when I say mobile home parks that, tenants, residents can move these houses in and out. It costs like $12,000 to move a house and reset it minimum. And so there's a lot of fallacy that has to be worked through in people's mindset, including banking mindsets, including government mindsets. The story has to be told. And so modular construction has actually been around for a while and is gaining steam in the case that I gave with my apartment investor buddy, but it takes a while for adoption to get spread through mainstream government, municipalities, and ultimately lenders.
I want to jump in really quick, guys. So my my next apartment complex up in McGregor, we're having a modular construction company put together plans for it, with the idea that within 2 days you can essentially build a 96 unit building, 4 stories. We're going to stack them on top of each other, and they're going to bring them in on crates. We're starting to go big into it in Austin. I shared some videos on my Instagram of one that we're working on. And we're going to try, I think I talked about it a little bit on the predictions episode, but we're going to try to build out whole neighborhoods with mods. But Mike's absolutely right. Like they've been around since forever. I mean, 20 years ago when I was going to school at Cal Poly, they were talking about modular homes as this new thing. The difference is, they aren't really movable. There are some limitations when they crane them in and put them together. But in places where, Austin, where stuff is selling for $600 or $700 a foot, and you can add square footage for $100 a square foot, all in, it's really, really incredible technology. So I'm glad that it's becoming so common and so easy right now. The technology is getting better on a daily basis, and in 6 months when we've done like 20 mods out here in Austin, the technology will have been even better. Like, we're sorting things out every day. We're changing the way we're doing the foundations, like trying to figure out like different styles of taking what was there. So that's going to be absolutely huge game changer. And I bet even some of the big home builders are going to start doing it. When you're building in a factory 24 hours a day, you can do it for so much cheaper.
It's so much more efficient. So much more efficient. I'm actually surprised it's not picking up faster. I don't know. In the hotel market, we've done a couple of projects where clients asked us to ship product to a factory, and the factory installed it into a big box, and that box got put on a truck and it just got delivered to a job site, and they just went pop, 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 pop. And like Aaron says, 2-3 days, an entire hotel was built. We actually shipped it to a company in Poland, and then they shipped all those rooms from Poland over the United States. And Mike, we did a couple of them, and I'm just surprised that hasn't picked up faster for obvious reasons of why it's just more efficient. And I wonder if, these are big trends, right? Construction companies, fees would go way down. The overall budget of construction on site would go way down. A lot of trades would probably lose. So there's probably some other institutional aspects of why this is not moving more efficiently. But I mean, I just see it as part of the future of construction. It's just the inefficiency on the job site, and time and weather just gets completely eradicated inside of a factory. So housing could be a really good place for that to start. I think we'll see that more in commercial. I just haven't seen it as much in commercial. So
what you just said about, I wonder how much of that's going on behind the scenes, the lobbying and the resistance. Cause like what you were saying about Poland, imagine if you could, get an entire house built, or an entire, apartment complex or motel or whatever, with labor from Mexico that eliminates the plumbers and the electricians and all of the things.
I mean, there's
absolutely. Probably a ton of resistance around it.
Yeah, was that you spoke to what I was just going to note, and I was talking. I interviewed the founder of Boxable. He's a billionaire. He's partnered with Elon Musk. I've interviewed, I think, two or three others that are similar in that space. And Mike, one of the things that kind of all of them touched on without going too far into it was, the lobbying against unions, a lot of other backdoor lobbying and handshakes that are, they don't want to flood the market with affordability as quickly as I think some of these companies having free reign to go about doing it could actually do. The other side of it, Aaron said it over and over again, which is the technology aspect of it. So many things that we're working through on the technology side. And it was, they were good at doing it, for maybe a few properties here and there, but doing it at mass scale was something that I know many of them were working through. But now you hear some of the technology on some of these companies, and they're not just building like affordable, little dwellings for, people that are struggling to find a house. They're building McMansions, they're building hotels. I mean, they're doing some really cool stuff, and the technology is exponentially growing on a daily basis. So I envision us seeing more of this. I know there's some of these models out of China.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. This one is coming from China. It's got everything built in. The ones in Europe are just boxes and they come in furnished, but apparently this company, and there's many of these, this is a small factory. We just actually visited just to go see what the hell's going on here. But they can actually build this to the code of the state in the United States that I'm shipping and delivering. Yep. So Mike, you want to do a nice, beautiful camping site. You're in Texas. You send the building codes to them and they build it to meet your building code in that state, and then you just plug into sewer, water, and electrical, and you're going. Just so I think that the efficiency, and those are 20 to 70 grand a unit, so cheap, very, very cheap. So fun. I wanted to talk about a little bit of there's some dynamics going on with well, let me see, where do I want to go? Let's go to global trade. A couple weeks ago, the U.S. had global shippers were attacked by some rebels in the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. Both of those ports have been sort of really shut down. There've been a lot of restriction in freight and transit. We recently attacked, so we could be at a war place. I don't know much about this topic. I don't know if you guys had some opinions. I mean, it looks like the United States could have, open war fronts in many areas, Israel and Gaza, and we have this thing going on in I think it's in Yemen or in Iran. So just kind of scary what's going on in the Middle East. At the same time, we're deciding whether or not we want to open up an office and grow sales in the Middle East. So it's a fun business topic for us in our boardroom. But any thoughts on what's going on, guys? I mean, we are definitely in a place where we could be in many wars at the same exact time.
The shipping stuff isn't new news though, right? Like with ports and stuff have always been getting attacked and pirates hijacking ships. And it's like, there's some places where where essentially they don't ship because they can't be insured anymore. And so it just requires, is it really new news? I understand the idea of doing like multiple smaller wars at the same time, which I think we'll probably do more proxy wars than like we did with Ukraine to get involved. But I think the shipping thing doesn't seem new to me, but maybe I'm totally missing something.
Well, I think that right now what's going on is about 20-30% of transit, mostly from Southeast Asia to Europe, goes through these two ports.
Okay.
And so now it doesn't increase costs, it increases time. And so people are watching it, but it's not necessarily affecting us yet in terms of logistics. We are seeing increases of cost of 10 or 20%. In Europe, I mean, this could affect them quite significantly, which I think is why, and again, I don't know enough about this in terms of geopolitics, but it must be why some of these countries are getting involved and attacking, because the cost to their economies is so significant if shipping slows down. And you got to go all the way around Africa. I mean, the Red Sea and the Suez Canal is like a little strip. It's like the Panama Canal. If you screw that up, you got to go all the way around. So it just highlights how interdependent the whole world is. something's happening on the other side. A few pirates in the United States now is involved in something that, why are we involved in that?
Yeah.
Just fascinating. And who knows what's going to happen? Mikey, what do you think?
Well, I just think, so the thing that I actually wanted to say is like, this is just another huge win for Elon. We were talking about Elon earlier, and I actually made a comment in the comments that I think Elon is AI. But it's interesting what he's doing at SpaceX, and I can't remember the number, but the new big rocket that he's working on and the ability to, ship like 10x the amount of stuff that a ship can ship. This just like, I see the opportunity in challenges like this. I agree with you. This is why more and more countries are getting involved, because I mean, even just like I think Aaron mentioned like being able to insure a ship. There's certain areas where these shipping companies can't even get their ships insured. And if insurance goes up by 20%, they're going to pass that savings on to the consumer. So I can't see a day where our world gets less volatile, and this stuff's just going to continue. And I just keep thinking back to Elon Musk and the fact that they're going to use SpaceX to ship things. I heard something, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago that, they'll be able to ship containers from China to the US in like a day instead of 30 days on a ship. And I just think about things like that and what accelerates the future business models. And it just gets me to thinking about the opportunities that exist, because we're living in a time where like you can't control these crazies. And the point that everything gets shipped through, like you said, 2 shipping canals at the end of the day, and it's taking twice as long to get there and more expense. The hope that I have on the other side of this is what technology is going to do for us to replace that type of stuff with things like Elon's building at SpaceX. And then the other thing that I'll add to it, when you think about this stuff, the fact that we're so uncompetitive in America when it comes to manufacturing and development, and the fact that you see Samsung factories getting built outside of, Phoenix so that we can, manufacture our own chips. That's a byproduct of the chip issues that we had during COVID. Well, this is another example of that, to where even though we're not competitive on manufacturing, I'll say this in 2 stages. Number one, I may have mentioned this on the show before, but I think the industrial investment in the future, not for manufacturing specifically, but storage and assembly. When you look at Mexico is going to probably be a huge contender in the future of manufacturing, but also just in time, shipping or storage, industrial assembly, maybe not manufacturing, but assembly, where we bring parts together and we assemble the last leg. I think the fact that this stuff's going on all over the world is going to put us in a place where over the next 20 years, America could come back to our roots of manufacturing, and probably be a huge win. Because when we get bottlenecked like we did during COVID on medicines and all of that stuff, or chips, that's one component. But when we get to a point where we can't get all kinds of products because of the volatility that's all around the world, it makes me hopeful that maybe someday we won't be so involved in controlling the world through our buying. Maybe we'll be more involved in actually manufacturing and bringing things back home because we're forced to.
I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day too, and there was a guy with him, and essentially we were talking about all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and this guy continued to pull every negative thing out and focus in and spotlight all of that. And it was just kind of, it was a reminder for me of how uncommon these types of groups, these types of conversations are, where people are always thinking about the upside, the optimism, the good, even in times of chaos and bad and darkness, right? Versus how most people's default thinking is to always be negative, to look for the bad, to, always be fearful. And I think it's so important, especially in times like right now, to be just tapped into conversations like this. So I'm grateful, for being around guys like you.
Well, it's all about opportunity. There's plenty of opportunity in all this chaos. That's the point of bringing it up, right? Is not to like stew in it, but to figure out, okay, where are the opportunities? I would love the day that we could ship globally in a day, Mikey. I need to read that article. That's the day where everything changes. All this political crap goes away. Because it is just factually true that we are not going to be making a lot of the products that we consume. We are a consumer-based economy. And so, I'm a little selling my own book, but I will say, and I didn't want to bring this up today, but, China produces a majority of what we import, and they have an aging population problem. I don't know if you guys are reading about that, but everybody in factories in China is like over 50 years old. There's no young population in any factory. And so if the global trade and manufacturing doesn't start to get moved and displaced pretty quickly, we're going to be in trouble in 10 or 20 years. We're going to want to buy stuff and we can't buy it, or no one's there to make it. So it's just fun trends going on in the world. I guess speaking of sort of global interdependence, I wanted to talk about global debt. Maddie, you put this into the chat here. Let me make sure I can pull it up properly. Looks like the world of debt, $97 trillion of global debt at the end of 2023. The United States has about 34.2% of that global debt, about $33 trillion. Just such a big part of this graph. Pretty amazing. And I think some of the things that are causing, some of the things that may be happening in the world that we don't really understand is like who's really owning this debt, right? Because we owe somebody something. So do we behave in a certain way based on who we owe money to? But either way, just super fascinating with how much debt we are consuming. You can see here, I'll blow this up a little bit. We have 34.2% of the global trade, and we're over 123% over the GDP in terms of debt. Mike, why does this matter? Does it matter? Are we still in modern monetary theory? Just doesn't matter. Keep printing money. Again, some of this debt is ours. Some of this debt we borrow from other governments. And is this a bad sign or not? That the whole world has this much debt?
Here's the first thing that I want to say. I don't know if this is a topic we should tackle today, because I brought this up and I think there's a lot to unpack here. But the one thing that I will say, I don't know how much time we have left, but the one thing that I will say, Kiyosaki always talks about the rules of money. And the one thing that I think that I've been, thinking about in my thinking time is how the rules of money have changed. And that's why I'm saying I don't know how far we want to go into this right now, but the rules of money have completely changed. In fact, the one thing that I'll position and toss it back, and maybe we do a deeper dive later, even inflation. 10 years ago, we would have said that inflation bad because of government debt. And we've even talked about this here. Because of government debt, on one hand, you want to control inflation because they have to pay that debt back with if their interest rate's higher. And so governments want to control debt. But one of the things that I've been considering and thinking about is when we're in an environment like we are now, where the debt doesn't actually get paid off, it gets reissued. When was the last time that we actually paid off any government debt? It just got reissued. We just keep printing more money through, bonds, really, at the end of the day. And the one thing that I'll say about this is I actually think that we're living in a time where the government needs, and this can shift and pivot, but I think we're living in a time where the government actually wants, and we'll just talk specifically about the United States government, but the fact that we all have central banks and everything's kind of tied together, it's really everybody. But he who has the most debt today, I think, wins, which you saw by the top of that chart that I shared with Visual Capitalist. It's definitely the United States of America. We are the dominant power still, and we are the dominant dollar. So he who has more debt wins, because government, there's been a big conversation about the GDP, and we've even been wrestling with this. If things are so bad, why is GDP so high? Well, think about this. If inflation has gone up, I'm just going to say 8% per year in the last 4 years, an iPhone that was $1,000 in 2020 is now $1,080 in 21, and $1,200 in 22, and $1,300 in 23, and $1,400 in 2024. So if Apple sells 100 iPhones in 2020, then that's what, $100,000. If they sell 100 iPhones in 2024, then that's $140,000. Did they sell any more iPhones? No, but their gross margin or their gross sales went up. Therefore, GDP went up. And the things that we keep anchoring on is like, oh, GDP is increasing 2%, 3%, 4%. So all of these other indicators that the government's watching and we're all excited about, oh, GDP continues to increase. Well, of course it does. Inflation's up. So I think it's a big topic, but at the end of the day, like it does matter if we have to pay off our debt, like all of us have to do as individuals. We can't just keep racking it up. But when the government doesn't have to pay off their debt, the rules of money have changed. That was the point that I wanted to make.
When you are the world currency, the rules are a little bit different. And I think we have strategically found a way to intertwine the global economy and get them drunk on dollars to where the unraveling of this would be so convoluted and really catastrophic to so many economies and countries around the world that we've kind of got people hooked on our drug in a capacity that we now feel like the scales and, you know, the weight of that dollar and the hold it has over the world gives us permission to be exactly what this graph shows, going, we don't really care if we have the most debt and if we have to continue creating more debt and if we have to continue printing more, because we're so far down this path now. Even when you look at BRICS and all of these countries that are trying to come together, majority of those countries are so intertwined with the US dollar that the unraveling of it would take, I was talking with a buddy of mine who, his organization and their quants, and they've really dug into this BRICS threat. And every time I ask them about it, they're like, yeah, this is a big nothing burger. Like, see what these countries are able to do without the US dollar and how much it would actually require of their countries to unravel. It would take decades, if not centuries, or complete resets from happening. And so that's kind of the black swan type of argument, right? But I am very much of the camp of where Mike is at and going, that
makes a lot of sense.
I just don't know if it matters right now. I think we could for sure find data and argument points to lean in on and say this is a threat and this matters and that matters. But in the grand scheme of things, for people like us, I don't think it matters.
Damn straight, Mooch.
Yeah, a year ago, we were talking a lot about people coming off the dollar. There was a lot of news about China and Russia trying to talk to come off the dollar because the U.S. had weaponized the dollar over like Ukraine and Russia and being able to seize Russian assets and things like that. And they're like, why would we keep our money in dollars if the U.S. could actually seize our assets? And Sachs talked about it a lot on the All In podcast. But that has turned out to maybe not be the thing, right? Like we did think people were going to come off the dollar, and then even so, they didn't. What I loved about this chart and this article and the little stats right below is this made me a lot less worried about our debt situation. Now, I want to know what gazillionaire family actually owns every country deep down, because it's probably not a country. It's probably a family. Probably somebody that we could really get deep into the conspiracy theories. I thought we owed China all of our money, but China owes somebody else all their money. What made me feel better about this is that top quadrant is the United Kingdom and Germany and France and Italy and Spain, which really geographically all of Europe is like the United States. So it's going like, okay, we're no worse off than Europe when I thought we were. And then you look over at China and Japan and it goes, all right, well, we're not, China's a giant place population wise. So maybe they're doing the best population wise. But if you're ranking like population based on like happy people in the population or people thriving, go down to the chart though, which is probably the cool. Yeah, India made it, dude. I would never forget India, Ash. But this is the part that I thought was really interesting. So we're not as bad as Japan. So if you just circling on that a little bit, it talks about debt to GDP.
Way worse.
Right. So U.S. is 120% debt to GDP. So if you're over 100, in theory, you're bad, right? So the U.S. is 120. Well, Japan is 255. But look at that. The UK, France, Italy. Like there's a whole bunch of major Canada even. There's a whole bunch of major players in the world that are over the thing. So this whole article actually made me feel better about the US instead of worse. I don't like that the US is in so much debt and the overspending and all the things. But this makes it look like we're just normal compared to everybody else in the world. And if we're grading on a curve, then it gets a little bit better.
We're
so I
still
think
doing
that's
pretty okay.
Yeah, I think we're doing pretty okay.
We're still doing pretty okay. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I mean, again, it doesn't, we talked about this on the previous episode too, just because Japan has these dynamics doesn't mean it's a bad country. So does it really matter when it comes down to everyday life, how we behave, right? I mean, Japan's such a beautiful country. People behave in such a lovely way. So it's not necessarily affecting the citizenry or in a way that we maybe understand. So just fascinating to watch what's going on. I mean, since 2019, global debt has increased 40%. So this is also a recent phenomenon. That's pretty big numbers.
I don't know if anybody's been following Kiyosaki, but he's been kind of getting some heat lately. And, you know, all the hater memes that love to latch on to some of the things that he said. But he goes, I've got $1.2 billion worth of debt. And I feel great about that because if I go down, that means the bank is going down. And if the bank is going down, that means some shit has really hit the fan. So the more, and I think we had this conversation in a Champions Mastermind at one point in time. It was like, the more you can get a bank to lend you money, good debt, right? Let's clarify that. Good debt on, good assets. The more beholden they are, like the more you own the bank, because if you go under, they go under, right?
They're screwed.
And so when you think about that context in terms of the world, we've got the most debt, but I also think we probably have the most secured interest with that debt. In how we have, layered that into our economy and how that insulates kind of what we do. And I think that's where we see some of this negligence and the doesn't fucking matter attitude from how we spend some of our money and where that debt gets allocated to. But I think it also somewhat showcases how powerful we know we are when it comes to that aspect of how it intertwines with the global economy.
When I first shared this World Economics on Visual Capitalist, I had another chart and I don't have it in front of me right now, but when you look at the bond ratings of all these different countries, US is still A, and the second largest debtor, I think, is China, right? But they're like the majority of these countries, back to Aaron's point, and Maddie, you just said this, we still have an A rating in the world, but like China's a C rating. And Japan is, I think Japan's still rated A. So the country that's been, upside down for 20 years, and they have a higher debt to GDP than the United States of America does, is still rated A-rated bonds. And so it's like, you really got to look at all of this, but China has a C rating. And, we keep saying like China's going to, stop buying American debt. They can't. Like they literally can't, because what are they going to do? Buy their own stuff? They can't do it because they can't even count on the return on their own investment like they can ours. So it's kind of crazy.
Well, there you go, guys. Another incredible fireside chat with the King's Table. Boys, really, really good to see you. I'm glad everyone is kicking off the year well. We all have our health goals. We're all going to be climbing Everest in 2024 with six packs. I'm excited to see you guys. Great conversation. I like the cadence today. That was good. Looks like our YouTube channel is just growing like crazy. Great views, good conversations. If you are listening and you're enjoying, please make sure that you engage with us and leave a comment in our conversations. We love you guys. Thanks so much for listening to the King's Table. Peace out. See you next week.